Great. Okay. Well, without further ado, I shall pass to Miguel Marcos Martinez to introduce the session and introduce our speaker today, Miguel Pantaleon. Over to you, Miguel.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm really happy to have Miguel Pantaleon here tonight. There's a great conversation that we've had on a couple of occasions about a topic which is really close to heart. He's going to talk about this topic tonight. I'll get to that in a second, but I wanted to mention Miguel is a member of SCIO. He's on the council there as well. He's extremely experienced in both the public and the private domain, working to get organizations, large organizations, to think systemically. And in those conversations that we had, we discussed what a barrier or a gap has developed between the mainstream, I might call it that, and the ideas behind systemic thinking, and specifically one aspect, which is the feedback loop. The word cybernetics is something that we also discussed, and how it seems to turn off certain people, or it's been driven into a completely different definition according to Hollywood, etc. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to Miguel. He's going to discuss how we can approach this gap to face challenges of climatic sorts, political, economic, social, and cultural. And I hope we derive a really rich discussion towards the end. So with that, Miguel, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you, the Cybernetics Society, for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for interest in listening my whatever I have to say about system thinking, cybernetics, and complex social problems. The first thing to say is these are my reflection about social complex system, working in some of them for a few years now, and whatever I will say today is based on this experience and my understanding of cybernetics. I have been in contact with cybernetics in SCIO. So Patrick Hoverstad is the chair of SCIO, and I'm a member of the global board. So, but just maybe some of the ideas that I will expose today maybe are irrelevant for you, or maybe will sound even silly, or some of them are controversial. But the point is, these are here to discuss. So I bring you just three questions in different dimensions, and that's all. So all the reflection that I will put on the table is just for reflect about this, and maybe at the end your decision is like, okay, that's irrelevant for us, or maybe bring or spark some ideas that maybe is useful. So having said this, so let me share screen, and I will start with the presentation. So I think the first question that, as Miguel said, so we were discussing in a few conversations about cybernetic system thinking, and how this can be really applying in social problems. So, and I stretch the idea into complex social problems. And this is something that it's more a feeling, a perception, being in touch with many other disciplines of system thinking, just collaborating with them, or just interacting with them on LinkedIn, on social media, or just training them in business schools or workshops. So I feel that cybernetics is losing relevance in tracking or in tackling these complex social problems. Maybe this is not the field of where cybernetics is more valuable. But from my point of view, or studying cybernetics and studying system dynamics, that is my background, I think it would be a shame if we cannot put some of the ideas or principles of cybernetics, because I think they are quite relevant for the situation or some of the problem we are facing today. So it's not coming. So this is me. So I basically my day-to-day work is I work in system and in system as system strategy and transformation partner. So I work with organization in helping them to deliver strategy and transformation. And I have a company here in the UK called Systemico, but I work in across Spain, the UK, Europe, and Latin America, mainly Mexico and all Central America, in different kind of projects and yeah, mainly project and client work. This is a little bit of my background. I started, as I said, with system dynamics in 2014, and I was engaged with simulation models and and system dynamics. But in a couple of years, I realized that the simulation models were very restrictive in the assumptions and require a very controlled environment for them to work. So I transit to causal diagrams, leaving the more mathematical and scientific approach to problems. And I develop my practice using causal diagrams. But over the years, I introduced other disciplines. So I study with more or less depth other discipline, like for example, social network analysis, and I merged together with causal diagrams, developing something that I call meta causal diagrams, because was about introducing people and power into the causal diagram. But I turned into a more softer approach in the later years, because for me was at least my practice was much more about helping people to make sense of this complexity and help them to just manage it with less trauma or with less pain, basically. So that's me. And the first question. So uh, I'm super happy to have a conversation instead of a talk, because I think I'm not sure how relevant all these ideas will be to have a minimum and rich conversation at the end. So please feel free to stop me and ask any question and engage in. I will happy to engage in a conversation more than in a one direction talk.
Can I ask you a question now?
Yes.
How do you do deep listening?
So what I try to do, so for example, I'm working with a digital marketing agency that work for travel, and the CEO talked me about lots of problems he has around. And what I try to do is to establish different dimension of problems and uh, try to understand what some kind of categorized problem to order the conversation in such a way that we are able to capture the practicalities of the problem, but at the same time, the main structure, or how these problems will affect his organization in this case, and at the same time, what are the factors that are causing anxiety or disturb in the personal level. Even though I'm not coach, but I try to create these different layers of dimension the conversation in such a way that at the end you need to align all of them in order to progress in the problem.
Thank you. Can I just test I've understood?
Yep.
Um,
Sure.
Deep listening is a way of creating a deeper collective understanding of the issues faced, to align those different perspectives, if I put words in your mouth now, to a common goal, which is beneficial for dealing with the social problems as defined.
Yes, but not only the different perspectives. It is that is true. So when I do this, for example, in groups, so I work with a board of directors in analyzing some of the main problems of their businesses. And it's not only to describe describe a complex situation from different perspectives, but it's trying to reveal the different dimensions of the problems. So because some of the dimensions will be practical, we have to do this in the very short term. Some of them will be dynamic, some structural, or some will relate with just the values of the organizations. And I think the clearer this dimension in this shared understanding, the better for it is easier at the end to manage the problem in a more sensible way.
Thank you. That's clear. Thank you.
Okay. So I think the first thing to me is define or create a frame for what I understand by complex social problems. And I'm for me, the complex social problems are something like this: are problems of overpopulation, of pollution, climate change, migration of displacement, social unrest, and polarization, war, and so on. So, and I think this, to me, some of the commonalities of these problems are the interaction between information resources, people, how people interact and organize themselves to produce outcome, and how all these dynamics produce power, and how power condition the way information resources and influence flows. And and this interaction creates create a very special, at least for me, a very special context for operating, where the standard rules of operating in an organization sometimes breaks, and it is needed a slightly different approach. And that's the idea for today. For me, I think this is by definition, so complex problems or complex social problems require coordinated actions along the system to create meaningful change. Not single actions will transform a complex problem. But in my experience, it is very difficult for a single organization to change this complex problem. So, and it require so because delivering this kind of change require actions that has special conditions. In some of the cases, this complex social problem requires cooperating without necessarily setting identity or achieving consensus. There are situations where, for me, working in a project, so in a project in Yemen for the University of Edinburgh in the Peace Red program, we were analyzing the conflict in Yemen. And I was creating a map of how power flow through the network in order to or reinforce the problem or stagnate the problem or just being able to move the problem to another site. So Yemen was in war since 2014. And the government was debilitating year after years, and the government was supported by two main external powers, that was Saudi Arabia and Emirates. And Saudi Arabia in 2021 forced the government to create a coalition, so they call it the Presidential Leadership Council. And this was a governance structure formed by 8 main members, and 4 of them were supported by the Saudi Arabia, and the other 4 were supported by the Emirates. And this coalition, this Presidential Leadership Council, has a common purpose, that it was to stop the Houthis, that was the rebel, to take control of the country and the oil reserves. But even though this was a common end, they didn't share internal goals, or they didn't share values, or they didn't even share identity. So the 4 of them that was supported by the Emirates, all of them had armies under their control, and they control different governorates and different ways of extracting taxes and resources from the communities. So, and when the Houthis wasn't putting pressure on the government breaks apart and compete between them. So they just fight for the control of a specific region or Hadramaut, or that is one of the governorates with oil. So they create some kind, even though they didn't share the ends or the means apart from fighting against the Houthis, they create this kind of cooperating without sharing internal values or things that brings them together to create a solid coalition. So other factors in some of these problems, the actors create a momentum to confront power structures rather than delivering product or services. And I found this interesting because it is so producing a service or a product reduce the complexity of the complexity of the organization, because you are reducing the complexity at the end. So you are producing just whatever that happened in the environment. I'm producing, for example, tomato soup. And that's my point, tomato soup. And you are reducing the complexity a lot because you are delivering just one product. But in some of these situations, the problem is you are confronting power structures that prevent you to being able to achieve whatever you want to achieve. And the network of actors, and these networks of actors are people, organization, and other stakeholders organize themselves to just to confront these power structures. And this is an example I worked before COVID in Spain. That is, so the Spanish government outsourced some of the social services and healthcare services into the charity sector. But the government didn't provide the funds for the charity sector to deliver these services accordingly. And then the sector relies on public and private funding, and the public funding was divided a few years later, was divided in 4 different layers: European Union funding, national, regional, and local funding. So the sector struggled to get funding because they had to compete with, they have to just fragment their projects for getting this funding in these different 4 layers. And at the end, when COVID struck, public funding swapped from these regular services to emergency services. And many of these organizations, small organizations in the charity sector, were about to collapse because they didn't have funds. They didn't have enough projects and enough access to the funding. So, and this was an effort to map out how the situation was at that moment for them to organize, to be able to require and ask the government to change the law in a meaningful way for them to be able to operate the services that was externalized to them. So, and I think this, from my point of view, this increased the complexity of the social problems, because sometimes the power is not evil power that is just controlling you, is just regulation, and regulation sometimes is very difficult to evolve. So, anything so far? The other factor is engaging in adaptive networks rather than in hierarchical and functional structures. And I think that's something, and I think that's the core of my idea here is, I think that these kind of problems, and that is controversial even for me, but here I go. So I think that's problem, or organization or system that are working this problem, maybe the aim is not to be viable in terms of getting the stability, so internal stability and being able to adapt, because in some cases the context they are operating in change so fast that they become irrelevant, so they become obsolete very quickly. So the point there is not being viable and durable. It is just to create a system that is able to easily integrate different functions without having an entry barrier or a entry barrier for others to come and provide the more suitable solution for the situation. And I will go back to this idea later, but in this example, we ran this for a year, this project with Madrid local authority, because Madrid has a very good transport system. It is really, really good, even though it requires investment and renew infrastructure and all the things. But this was a project to create a manifesto to integrate mobility as a service into the city to complement the public transportation. And we engaged 30 different stakeholders, from the regulators to the startups to the infrastructure, like, for example, train infrastructure like Renfe or Albertis, and energy providers, cat manufacturers, all these stakeholders, to discuss about what are the obstacles for implementing mobility as a service, that is shared mobility, scooters, bicycles, shared carrying into the city. The main obstacle there was the political will. So there were a situation where the local government was the different political sign to the regional government, and it was a struggle. So the local government created a ULEZ zone, but when the political government changed, they disarticulate the ULEZ zone and reduce it massively and let the car again go into the city. And the other one was daytime regulation. So what we did here is we engage in 8 different workshops and depict the transport system and user requirements and force mobility to work, for them to find entry points for collaboration. So to bring public-private collaboration into closer. But for example, the scooter companies, scooter startup, they were investing in the city because they were just taking advantage of the hole in a regulation. But Barcelona, for example, changed the regulation and banned the scooter into the city. So the whole companies, the whole service of scooters was rushed out the city. So in this case, doesn't matter how well you are or how well you are stable internally as an organization, because you are just banned for operating in this city. Obviously, you can go to another city, but I think that's the nature of these kind of problems, that they can change very rapidly, and an organization that has to build infrastructure, for example, maybe cannot change at the same pace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and finally, another characteristic is, in this context, actors most of the time seek for long-term impact rather than short-term returns. And I think this is because the resources of this organization is detached from the value creation or the value delivery. So the charity sector sometimes, at least in Spain, is more clear. So the resources for the charities are detached for the short-term service delivery. They apply for European funds. They have funds for a year or 2 years of programs, and doesn't matter what value they deliver. They have to justify this money, but not necessarily justify in a very accurate way how much value you deliver. So, and I think because this detachment because they don't get the resources from the selling things or just providing services, I think they push this organization to operate in a business model that is seeking long-term impact instead of short-term return. And this is the example of Oxfam. Oxfam is an organization that provides that want to help communities to lift poverty by humanitarian work and advocacy. And I was involved in this project where some of Oxfam chapters or organization in Spain, France, and West Africa joined together in this conversation to understand the opportunities for producing social change in election times. And we were exploring what were the barriers for delivering this social change. And the point here is this conversation may inform the policy and strategy design in Oxfam International, but not necessarily has an impact on we are providing this service because this service is what the community needs right now, and we can earn money from this service, even though this money is obviously reinvested for the good of the community. So, and I think this detachment condition the way they interact with in this complex social problem. So far, this is my definition of complex social problems and the characteristics of how organization and people intervene with these problems. I'm not sure if this resonates, something of this resonate to you, or is just nonsense. What do you think?
I think it's
Seymour, yep, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm listening to this, and Miguel, you started off in saying, we're concerned about, is cybernetics in its largest context losing relevancy, and I'm looking at watching all of the deep work that you've done, from deep listening and collaboration through, and I'm saying this is wonderfully relevant, and it makes extremely good sense, especially in a dynamic environment. So I'm not sure where the issue is. I think what you're presenting is very realistic in terms of when you're working with a fast moving set of dynamics, how do you manage short-term and long-term to serve both your customer who's paying for you as a consultant, but in addition to serve your customer's customer, whom you're going to have a direct impact. So it's overall, I'm seeing only good, positive things out of this. Although you did delete, and I didn't catch why you deleted the word emergent, because it seems to me that would be one of the inherent characteristics of the relationship model that you build in order for any of the organizations that you serve to be able to move forward and respond. So I'm sorry I can't criticize. It's only good things.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Seymour. I think you're right. And I think the emergence is the whole point of this. For me, emergence is the essence of the idea that I will introduce now, that is this emergent adaptive system. I think, and that maybe is controversial even for me, I think that the way we design organizations right now are suitable for a specific context where there are some kind of stability, some kind of, at least some kind of understandable change dynamic, or dynamic in change dynamic, let's put it in this way. But what I found working in this environment is this rule doesn't apply in this way. And the way we design organization it is not fit for purpose. So my idea is we need a different way of doing this. And for doing this, we need to take into account emergence, how fast the environment changes, and design organizations that are able to take emergence and adapt. So organize into the emergence as the situation emerges, and adapt to wherever the value they have to provide. And that's why integrating, so being able, a system that is able to integrate parts that provide real value in this specific context and leave other parts that are less relevant, That's the idea. How to get this, how to achieve this, I don't have a clue. But I think conceptually, I think this is, at least for me, my experience, this is a more suitable model than the regular organization.
So we've got a question from Janos, and then I have a question for you.
Hello.
Janos.
Thank you very much. This kind of problem of, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
This kind of problem of losing relevance of cybernetics or any other systems question to tackling social or complex problems has been raised, and a solution I propose to have been found. Now, that is what I'd like to describe very briefly, not to impose on your patience. And what I'd like to say is that cybernetics or system thinking is part of the human intellectual endeavor, such as the fine and performing arts and conventional science. Now, we know that the arts appeal to humanity because they are relevant to or raise emotions. Conventional science has been very successful and relevant to society because it provides solutions to intellectual problems or rational problems. Now, why is systems thinking and cybernetics is relevant? The term cybernetics has been coined by Norbert Wiener a long time ago, and the solution to this problem of removing this irrelevance is to construct a proper problem-solving theory of which is based on the theories of conventional science. Now, which means that it has to be built on accepted branches of knowledge, and has to be teachable, and the solution to the problem of making complex systems or whatever it is relevant to society is to make this new theory of problem solving teachable in schools and generally in higher education and university. Now, I don't know if I should go on, if I have got time to outline this in more detail, but published and unpublished papers are this theory of problem solving is available. And but if you like, I can not necessarily now, but I don't want to go on to sort of talking too much. So I signed up. But what I wanted to ensure or say is that the solution or resolution of the problem is in sight. It's a question of debating it and perhaps.
Janos, I completely agree with what you are saying, but the paradigm is or the condition is there should be a schools for this to be teachable, and there should be a scholar that develop this theory. But for example, working in Yemen, 80% of the population is under the level of they are completely poor. So they are not in some areas are so rural that the only thing is the tribal law that what is worth, and the paradigm, the way they see the life and the world is completely different to us. So I completely agree with there should be a theory, there should be teachable, but there are situations where this is not even possible. So, and I think that's one of the things that we need to overcome as well.
If I can just briefly answer, is the core of the problem that you raised, and I'm advocating that there is a solution, is that the system thinking is, and of course cybernetics, which is just a particular configuration, is speculative. There is no way that the kind of speculative ideas gain relevance and are not applicable to developing a proper theoretical framework that satisfies the solution to a problem that you raised and I raised it a few years ago. That's why I developed this solution.
Janos, if we've got time, we can continue a little bit down this path. I want to make sure that we get all the questions available for the rest of the audience. So if it's okay with you, we'll go to Mike and then to Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you, Janos.
Miguel, first of all, I congratulate you on raising this issue the way you have. It is one of the intractable issues of our time, I think, about how we approach the resolution of very difficult questions and issues that we are actually causal in creating. So I'm less concerned about problem solving, if I can just address that for a moment, than how all action that flows to consequences creates the problem in the first place. So when you take a look at the diagrams that you have created, I go back to the origins of cybernetics, which is about steering. And for me, it's a question of then, what are we trying to do at what level of scale, if you look at it from the point of view of complex systems? And if we try and address a third order or second order issue in the pattern of relationships using first order thinking, that's when problems get created and solutions adopted, which actually make matters worse. So you create a situation in which, in aviation and automotive, where I spent quite a lot of time, and financial services, you create compound cost of failure, which is quite extraordinary. The issue for me is, what is the appropriate process pathway from where we are and how we got here to where we want to go, and how do we get there by changing the way in which we've accomplished the current situation? And for me, there's a whole range of issues around what is the emergent property of the relationships between the parts that we need to be actively engaged with and influence, if I use your word, to produce that emergent property of the process pathway. And can we be flexible enough and agile enough and understanding of each other's position on your deep listening proposition to really think through how we activate the contributions of the various parts to produce that emergent property, which creates a higher level of value at the point where it really matters. I don't have the answers either, but I do have the similar questions to you. And for that reason, I think it's a really good thing that you brought this, and I'm really impressed by the way in which you brought it to us as well. So I hope what I've said is really encouraging of you, rather than trying to give you some alternative perspective on what you should be doing.
No, thank you, Mike. I have been questioning myself this because, you know, something that I love about second-order cybernetics is the observer view, and I think, and this is my own thinking that I'm still developing, but I think the problem is the way we phrase the problem, we frame the problem, and because, as Peterson just said, today's problem are just comes from yesterday's solution. Is the same.
Yeah.
So we are creating problems, but just making this conversation, we are creating new problems that we want to be aware of. And I put it here in a specific terms because here.
Yes, exactly.
work together to transform it into an acceptable state that open possibilities for different outcomes. And I think that's interesting because when you work in conflict or peace building, I work in conflict from the point of view of peace building and capacity development and these kind of things, not involved in the conflict. But when, for example, when I work in Myanmar and they had political parties that has an army, I didn't get it. And when I call, I remember in my first conversation, I called a group, terrorist group, and they stopped the conversation and said, no, we don't use this word here. This is not a terrorist group. This is your framework. So my point here is these are just situations, not necessarily a problem. And I think the problem comes when the power in charge doesn't have legitimacy.
Yes.
And if we translate this into our business environment or more stable environment, it's more or less the same, but with less accurate. But I think what this makes me think is that we are not framing this problem correctly. And this is why we cannot find, we are trying to solve or dissolve the problem. That's not a problem. The only thing that matters, I think, from my side is legitimacy. If this system is legitimate to serve the community, there's no problem there. The only problem, we can optimize the system, but
Well, exactly. And if I may, at this point, I usually ask the people I'm working with, how do you solve a system rather than frame it as a problem? Because inevitably, the way you've defined this is it needs the multiple actors with the different power structures, etc., that are distributed throughout the system to alter the contribution they're making, and to do that mindful of the outcome they're jointly trying to achieve. And really the complexity of, and I think the value of cybernetics is to, on your deep listening proposition, to understand those different agendas in a way that they can be optimized and a process pathway that stands a better chance. And I'm a great believer in Bayesian belief networks. So I'm dealing with probabilities of probabilities at this point and emergent properties. But I think the point that you make about problems is, I'm not sure about that. How do you solve a process? How do you solve a system? How do you solve a policy? How do you solve and it's through the human dimension of that and how we interact that really the pathway lies.
I think the human is the key. Yeah. Jonathan, if
I was just going to say, well, excellent presentation and provocation, and also brilliant input from Janos, Seymour, and Mike. I was going to suggest we move into breakouts for 20 minutes at this point. So before I hit the button, Miguel and Miguel, the system will automatically put you in a breakout room, but you're more than welcome to come out if you prefer, just to leave those conversations run, or also to dot around between breakout rooms. So either's fine. Yeah, go on, Miguel. Unless you've got more slides that you wanted to present to us before we go into breakouts. So
yeah, let me introduce just the question, because I have this was the first question. I have a second question for you.
Brilliant.
That comes from that's in 5 minutes. I'm able to solve all of this, because that's the definition, my definition of complex social problem, and one of the characteristics of this. But that's the previous idea brought me into the reflection of, is living organism paradigm suitable for this context? And I think it is maybe not fit for purpose, or has to be redefined or updated. And I think a better framework could be an emergent adaptive system. So the situation changes very rapidly. The interaction among the parts makes emergent properties to arise, and we need to create systems that are able to get this situation and deal with this situation. And when this situation disappears, maybe the system is not relevant anymore, and we need to create another system. This idea is against wealth conservation and organization, the establishment of organization, but is focused on value delivery instead of the conserving these structures. That's the second point, is instead of homeostatic organization that keep themselves, keep the internal stability and are able to be independent, exist independently and adapt, I suggest purpose-driven networks. This network is designed or is created by this to deliver this purpose. And this can gather different actors because we can create this purposeful interaction. And I work in San Sebastian, and they tried to, after COVID, they tried to create this community network, support network for vulnerable people, but they weren't able to do it because it was a purposeful network that arises because the community need to take care of the older in the community. And as soon as the threat disappeared, COVID was under control, these systems, these networks disappear as well. And the local authority wasn't able to re-engage the community in these networks. Instead of centralized global decisions, so all the information coming up towards this kind of brain of the organizations, I propose coordinated local decision, because depending on what part of the system are you intervening or are you providing solution, maybe you need to make local decision but coordinate it in some way with the rest of the network in order to optimize resources or learning. And instead of internal stability, I prefer seamless integration. If this network is a purposeful network, we just need actors that come very easily and provide value very, very rapidly, instead of just creating a structure and maintaining a structure that maybe will get obsolete tomorrow. And I think this is the last one. Instead of efficient value delivery, is sustainable impact. Instead of producing services, this is my service and is so efficient and the cost is so low. We need to create sustainable impact. We need to create positive outcomes in the community or in the system we are intervening, and being able to maintain this impact. Okay, this will be for later because it's a comparison between the underlying assumption of the Bible system model, what I'm proposing, that is this emerging adaptive system paradigm. I will send you the presentation if you want to have a look, and if you have any question, I'm happy to have a conversation and get deeper.
Yeah,
and that's
we
my second
had,
question.
by the way, Miguel, that question about the presentation, so we'll be happy to forward that for you.
Yeah, great. So, and that's my second question for you. So it is not just about if we are losing relevance from the cybernetics perspective into the social complex problem. I think we are not especially well positioned there, but we are so relevant there. Let me put myself into the cybernetic shoes now. And I think cybernetics principles and rules and solutions are critical for complex social problems. But we need to find a way. We need to fill the gap between. We need to find design the right tools for people that are intervening, that doesn't know anything about system thinking, for them to be able to use the tools and the principles and the guidelines for them to deliver their work better. And I think that's the challenge. And my question for you, for the breakout rooms, is how can cybernetics help emerging adaptive system, if this concept holds, to manage complexity, to deliver value in the fluid environment? How can we use cybernetic principles, idea, tools, well-tried solutions for helping them to deal with this emerging complexity and disappear and rearrange better, keep themselves relevant, or whatever that we can help them to do? I leave this question there, and you manage to solve it.
Thank you.
You just said to deliver value, but you said just in the previous slide that you should be talking about sustainable impact rather than value.
Yes. but I think the way they have to, or maybe we can merge the meaning, but the way organizations, for example, USAID is putting 300 millions in a program in West Africa, and there are a consortium of organizations managing these 300 millions, and they have to collaborate. They have to work with local partners, and the local partners act in this specific area in Mali or in whatever the country, and they have to deliver value. They have to train people. They have to help them with the harvest. They have to whatever to help them to lever the local economy, and they have to deliver this value in this fluid environment where conflict and Al Qaeda is present, Russia is trying to take control of the government, and so on. And this value had to transform into sustainable impact. So they have to, by delivering value, they have to create this impact and sustain the positive outcome.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Any clarification questions before I put us in breakouts? David, not sure if you're trying to ask it. You're on mute, David. Do you want to unmute?
I hopefully I've unmuted. I want to challenge how far the problem is our lack of subtlety and understanding of systems, and how far these problems are just inherent evolutionary dialectics of the process of competition, and some cooperation has been a feature of life on this planet since before we came along, and other beasts from ourselves were organizing, had their own social problems. I mean, what about sibling rivalry, for example? So really evolving common moralities would be rather nice. The work of the encyclopedists before the French Revolution, rather sapping the willpower of the upper classes, might have been more effective than the particular systemic intervention. I do get the impression that your grasp in the particular situation, say in the Middle East, is extremely good and extremely appropriate for that situation. But if you want to change something, you don't necessarily hit people with logic. You give them the impression that you're a sound, trustworthy, well-meaning person, and you spend a lot of time showing up and burnishing your credentials to some degree, rather than just saying, if only you would understand requisite variety a little bit better, you idiot. Everything would be hunky-dory for all of us. I'm far from convinced that what's great for the human race is great for the rest of the denizens of this planet. So that's my challenge.
That's amazing, David. And I think I don't have an answer for this, but I completely agree. I think we are putting too much pressure in our rational mind, and you know, even the way I formulate this is so complex and with concept that only a few people can understand. And if I go with this question to whatever the other context, they will throw a stone to me, say, well, "What are you talking about?" And that's your comment about competition cooperation is, I think that's the point, or one of the point, at least for me, because it is the way we formulate, is the way we present, or we talk about ourselves about this is a problem. Maybe not. It is not a problem. It's just something that happened because that's the system. That's when we are a certain amount of people, we compete and we cooperate, and at the end, cooperation is greater than competition because we are here and we are not extinct. so far.
Long run when you don't know the end. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we are just cooperating very efficiently to destruction. So maybe we will be there. But I think I present you extreme cases because I think this shows the argument very clearly. But something that I don't understand coming from Madrid, that this is the city I come from, is why the coffee costs here £4 and the service is so rubbish. And I think that's unfair. Because if you want to charm me, if you want to steal from me £4, okay, but at least you have to compensate me with something that I value. Not I have to order, I have to take the cup into the till when I finish, and I have to thank you for stealing £4 from me. And this is an unfair system that, and this is a silly example, and this is an unfair system that we are tolerating because the money is flowing towards some part of the system that are filling their pockets. My question, some concept that guide me is this legit? Does this power structure has legitimacy to put that much pressure on our society that people cannot even pay the bills? So and I think that's where system thinking and cybernetics is relevant for helping us to create more sensible systems. We have to compete, we have to collaborate, but at least I think we can optimize the system we live in.
Something different could be better, yes. And I say, I mean, even if you're a hegemon, you probably want systems theory to sort of maintain your hegemony, but maybe the more people who understand networks, whatever systems, the more difficult that might be, which I would think overall would be a good outcome, at least for the human race in the medium term.
Absolutely.
I don't know, but thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I will hit the button and put us in breakout rooms. So I'll pop us in for 15 minutes. So I shall hit the button and then I'll give you all the 1 minute
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for being about to send my poster around.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, no problem. I shall.
And I agree with your reasoning. Because I'm always I'm digging around in my email thinking, where's that link? I know Jonathan sent that link. Right?
Yes, yeah. I always keep the lines clear in the last 48 hours before, so it's the top email.
Totally. People haven't left their breakout rooms, have they?
No, sweet.
Hanging on to them.
Yes. So I have another 2 or 3 more to come.
They're probably having a
They're
very
serving beer in the
fascinating.
breakout room.
Yes.
The breakout room wasn't recorded, was it?
No. The breakouts weren't recorded, Janos. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't get it. Was
Yeah.
it recorded?
They weren't recorded.
Oh, bloody hell. Because that's where I propounded what I wanted to propound.
That was recorded.
Well, it was a waste of time.
No.
Yeah.
We'll follow up with you, Janos, anyway. But yeah, this is a really interesting series of questions that's come up tonight. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss, Jonathan, at some point is to see if we can get some artists to present.
Yes.
I was very much, I don't want to take up time because Miguel needs to address the rest of the people, but I was very taken by Janos's comment about the arts. So anyway, take it away,
I'm sure
Miguel.
Vanilla must know somebody.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really good point.
So Miguel.
Yep. So we have a very interesting conversation about in our group about if this is something that we need to, as Jano said, teach in schools, and if we are naturally a system thinker, or is something that we develop, or even how when we explore complex problem we are in, the solution is, or the reason why this complex problem emerges in another part of the system completely different. And it was really interesting. So my question now is, how do you want to proceed? Because if we want to discuss, or I'm happy to, if you have any question for me, great. If not, I'm happy to come back to the couple of slides in the presentation. It's just up to you.
Well, maybe what we could do, Miguel, is take any immediate feedback, let you do those 2 slides, and then we can then go back to rolling Q&A and feedback, if that works.
Yeah. Okay. Happy to do it. So let me just come back for a moment to this idea that it's just some assumption, and here I'm challenging my own assumptions about what is cybernetic and what is this idea that, or my idea. It is not even a proposal. It's just an hypothesis of how things could work better. But I'm testing here, and I was reflecting about BSM, or Bible System Model as a cybernetic model, and this new another paradigm. And the underlying assumption is, for me, and this is for sure, this will be controversial, and I'm happy to correct myself. But for me, cybernetics, or the Bible System Model, has an assumption that the environment is stable enough to be anticipated. So this system 4 is looking at the future, is looking at the external environment, and is able to identify the need for change. And I think it means to me that for the system 4 to be able to do this, means that the environment is changing at some kind of slow pace that we are able to look at it and to say, okay, this is relevant for us, this is not relevant for us. Because if the environment would change much faster, we weren't able to predict or anticipate what is relevant to us or not. So some kind of stability in the environment, it is necessarily required for us to exist and for us to be able to adapt to whatever change in the environment. So if change very quickly, we are not able to adapt. Another is the law of requisite variety is very compelling, but I'm not sure if it is possible in this complex system, because one of the ways the organization is achieving requisite variety for keeping itself alive is because they reduce the outcome of the organization. We provide these services, we provide these products, and because of this, we are just taking these orders. And obviously this reduce and this bring the organization into some kind of boundaries, and we can ignore the rest of the environment that is not relevant for the kind of complexity we deal with. And I'm not sure if this is true. I think in complex social systems, this requisite variety is unattainable, so we cannot deal with this. If we have to provide value with not specific, if we have to react or respond to the needs in the environment, maybe today we have to provide these kind of services, and tomorrow we have to provide some kind of I don't know, therapy, or the other one we have to provide some kind of networking, and we have much more variety in the outcome that a normal organization can have. So the other one is internal stability is achieved through the effective flow of information and resources, and this implies that you have the sensors and you have the processes and you have the tools for getting this accurate information flowing. But again, I think this in reality this is not only in very specific fields or very specific situation. This is achievable, but not really when people are interacting and ideas are changing and power is getting exerted. I think it's much more difficult to get this accuracy. So there is a shared identity to keep the boundaries of the organization. There is a shared identity achieved through the continuous process of reinforcing norms, values, belief systems. So the system 5 is in charge of just reinforcing this identity for the organization to remain inside its boundaries. And as I explained before, I think that don't necessarily happen in real life. I think here, for example, we have different values, some common norms, some common language, but I come from a completely different background, or I work in a different environment, and maybe I understand cybernetic concept in slightly different ways, and maybe I don't apply them because whatever. But even in a very normalized situation, it's very difficult that everything is identity, norms, values, and beliefs are aligned without a reinforcing structure. And there are well-defined functional and structural boundaries in an organization. So to steer the organization and to absorb variety, there is a functional division from my point of view in the cybernetics. So here is the diagram is the example. Very well electric engineer diagram of how function and parts are interacting for absorbing this complexity. And I think that's not that organization struggles, but when you have to intervene in these moving systems, is this kind of structure and well-defined functions doesn't work in this way. So and I think that I propose this idea, that is, I found this visual compelling because it is like the colors for me is just sometimes dependent. So the shades underneath are the changing environments, And these changing environments overlap each other and sometimes they combine. So one organization or one group of people, one system, emerging system, can be just in different contexts operating at the same time, and sometimes they are in one of them. So depends on their context. And for example, here, one emergent system can just transform itself to take different roles and function depending on the environment they have to operate in. So, and they can reorganize even combining with other systems, work collectively if the environment requires this change. And I'm thinking about an example of this. I think I am an example of this emergent properties, so or this emerging adaptive system. So I'm a part of a system that, depending on the environment I operate in, I behave differently, and I have different roles, and I have different shapes, and I have different skills. So I'm here presenting on Cybernetics Society, and I just adapt my talk to cybernetics principles and models. If I'm presenting I went to a business school in Barcelona, and I adapt my language, my discourse to the design part of the course. So depending on the context, I'm taking different shapes, different colors, different roles, different positions. So sometimes I'm leading, sometimes I'm just supporting. And I think in this, for example, in these multi-layer environments, so they are very sensitive to shift in power. So thinking about, for example, the social problems. So now United States is heading towards the second mandate of Donald Trump, and everyone will be affected by it. So he confirms that he will use the army to massive deportation, so mass deportation. So now we are getting into this environment is completely conditioned by the shifting power. So we are heading into a disruptive state instead of a stable one. So clients and user needs are constantly evolving, increasing variety, and no single organization can respond to these needs. And I think this creates, in the standard market approach, can create a space for competition or a space for more companies providing the same services. But I think this won't be enough to respond to the level of complexity that this environment required. And there are compatible and competing ends and means among the different partners. So they can collaborate, they can compete at the same time. So depending on the situation, sometimes we are partners, sometimes we are competitors, and sometimes we just ignore each other. There are fragmented identities, values, and beliefs, and there are unclear short-term outcomes, and getting the data, structured data and information to analyze and monitor the situation is very difficult. One of the constant questions when I was designing these metacausal loop diagrams in peace building, analyzing network structure, power dynamics, and causal loop diagrams, putting together into a graph database, the question was, where this information come from? So do you have reliable data about that this actor is related to this other actor? And that's one of the main problem. There is a weak control, and it's more influence oriented, and the boundaries of this emerging adaptive system are more fluid than the organizational one. That is a consequence of the way of organizing. What do you think?
I've got a quick comment. So thanks, Miguel, for the follow-up comments. I wonder if the emergence of this adaptive system requires kind of a healthy ecosystem to be there in the first place. So, for example, during COVID, we had furlough. So it was kind of almost like a form of UBI, universal basic income, so that people weren't starving. They were able to help each other and form communities and support each other. Whereas if you destroy kind of the infrastructure, the kind of the health of the kind of the underlying kind of population, they're unable to help each other. You don't get that. So my fear is that, for example, in America at the moment, he'll be destroying the infrastructure, and people will be unable to help.
So when during COVID, when people said, "Oh, life won't be the same ever again," and I say, "Yeah, it will. It will. As soon as we stop this pandemic, and as soon as we develop the vaccine, we will come back exactly to the same way of living, because we didn't destroy capacity." And that's what my argument. I don't know if I was right or not, but discussing this with friends, I say I think the difference between war and COVID is, in war we destroy capacity, we destroy infrastructure, we destroy cities, homes, everything, and we have to rebuild it, and we take advantage of this opportunity to change things. The Great Fire in London is a good example of the reconstruction of Paris at the end of the 19th century. This trauma happened, but the trauma helped us to rebuild the city in a different way. And this, we changed the system around the city because we enabled to do things. I think so. With the mass deportation of the United States, for example, I think we are destroying the social capital. So we are destroying the social infrastructure. We are destroying the bonds of families and social networks. And I'm not sure what is the outcome of this beyond the economic problem, if they really deport a sufficient amount of people. But I think they are destroying this American dream. That will be very difficult when they need people to take people into the country for the kind of jobs, for example, they are delivering, and they are breaking the trust, social trust in government, because you are breaking after years and years of generation. We feel threat, not me because I don't live there, but families will feel threatened by the possibility of being deported. So what kind of trust, this social contract, you are breaking the social contract with, we don't know what consequences in the future. So I think some kind of system emerges when things are complicated. Like, for example, you mentioned during COVID, and other things also emerge when things are much better. So art, or for example, is a good, I think is a good emergent property of this. I'm not sure if I replied to the question, but so Jonathan.
Yeah, a few reflections. I think the challenge you posed is very timely and well articulated. And if I reflect on these last two slides, so if I think the distinction you're drawing is well positioned. If I think about the VSM, and some of the conversations that Mike, you and I have had on this, there are things where, for most of my career, I was in aviation. So a lot of these preconditions in the organization I worked for were true in terms of long product life cycles, relatively stable, fairly shared purpose. And the VSM I found really useful, but it was in that context. And I think there are enhancements to that. So again, the sort of stuff Mike and I have talked about in terms of you layer the cultural dimension. So you'll have different, if you like, variety in terms of the way individuals or groups will respond to situations, not just intellectual requisite variety, but kind of emotional, social requisite variety. So I can see with the VSM, there are ways we can enhance or add other methodologies in to enhance that. But the constraint is when these conditions start to not be true, then I think you then go to that second slide in terms of the kind of the emergent situation. And I think in terms of analysing a situation, we could use both models. So on some of the slides you presented, to understand the whole system, I think we're into the emerging adaptive, because you've got distinct groups, very fluid, different identities, different purposes, and then we might pick chunks of that where the VSM might actually start to be useful, although we might have layerings of identities, layerings of purpose, but it still holds true enough that the VSM may give some insight. So I think you've articulated it really well. I agree with the thrust of your argument. I think both methodologies have value depending upon these preconditions, and it could be using both in the same situation.
Absolutely. I won't. I don't want to call this a methodology. This is just a hypothesis reflected on the presentation. But I think you are completely right, and this is where I feel the discomfort with cybernetics, and I completely biased because the way I interact with cybernetics. That is, one day I jump into cybernetics without knowing anything, and no one explained to me what cybernetics was, so I discovered it by myself. But I think that's the point. I think when we set up the boundaries. The methodology, system thinking methodology. So this is critical system heuristic, this is system dynamics, this is operational research, this is cybernetics. I think we are, I don't know, we have different tools with different methodologies, but the essence is the same. And what I propose here is, this is my experience working with this emerging complex problem. And I think cybernetic is so valuable there, but not the or not the cybernetics in this way, in this diagram that is a blueprint of some kind of electric or electric system, or just engineering system. It is the principle behind this, and maybe these principles only work in a specific situation. But when we have this specific situation, they are amazing. So we have to take advantage of this when the complex problems enter into a stage when they need to be steered, when they need to be controlled.
Because as I've kind of educated myself a bit more on the history of cybernetics, it feels like there was looking at the work in the 50s, 60s, and even the 70s, a lot of it was very much about, well, let's set something up like the homeostats or others, and let's see what emerges. It was very much an emergent experiential type of thing. And then the VSM kind of set one path, which is, once the emergence has happened, how do you then kind of control and understand? But it very much depends upon the nature of the problem you're dealing with as to which gives most insight.
I think that's, at least for me, it's because my work is, so I have a battery of tools, whatever. The framework is like I'm like a builder, so I have my hammer, I have my ruler, whatever.
Yes.
And every time I go to a client, I'm going with all my stuffs on top. And the client starts talking, and he starts saying, "Oh, I went for a running, or I just yesterday was shopping, or I was late because my son was playing." And that's the human part of the problem, and you need to understand perfectly this. And even in a conversation, I think it's the small scale of a social problem, because you are dealing with people, and this person is explaining, is opening you a window to their emotions and their concerns, and this human aspect of human or emotional core that they uses to deal with this complexity in a structured way. And the better you understand this, the human part, the emotional part, and the psychological tools they have to deal with this structural complexity, the better you are able to make sense of this, or helping him or her to make sense of their own problem. But when they have to articulate it, that's a very good tool for restructuring an organization, or for controlling something. And this is what I'm proposing. So identify in what stage of the problem we are in order to apply whatever the principle or whatever the tool. So,
I've got one more question. Miguel, so given that you're talking to a cybernetics audience, if you want to describe something as a living organism, you've got to kind of address the central question of autopoiesis. We kind of discussed this in the breakout room, and I think we all had different interpretations maybe of what autopoiesis actually is, but you can't avoid the question. You need to factor that into your discussion, I think.
To me, even though I didn't formulate it here, I had a few slides proposing the principle, cybernetic principle that I consider could be very useful for using this. And the first one was autopoiesis. Why? Because if we are in this scenario, an emerging adaptive system has to be able to regenerate and regenerate and recreate itself. So a system that needs to integrate parts and release other parts that are not useful anymore is a way of regenerating. So to keep the value delivery in an or effective. So but the system, the way the system keep themselves in place, regenerate and repair itself, to me is the essence of this emergent adaptive system. Because if you don't have this, the system will just disappear maybe earlier than it's supposed to be. And I'm so to me this is central in terms of and it's something that I experience in dealing with whatever the system. So when they lose this capacity to repair or regenerate, they very easily disappear. Does it make sense? Cool. Sorry.
Sorry, I have trouble hitting the mute button. Just a quick question. Has anybody come across a paper by Raul Espejo called An Enterprise Complexity Model, Enterprises, Organizational Systems and Dynamic Capabilities? Because it's, I actually, the only time I've ever seen him speak, I went to see him speak about this in London a few years, I think it was during COVID. And it's basically a paper trying to apply the VSM, or VIPLAN to be more precise, in the context of multiple enterprises. But the basic assumption is that there is one, if in any particular context, there's one enterprise that's basically in charge, sort of leading the others. But it's sort of in the same space as this. I just wondered if he'd ever brought it to the Cybernetics Society. Or
Raul did present at the Cybernetics conversation in the summer. So he did present about, obviously mentioned Project Cybersyn, but also the VIPLAN. So yeah, talked us through some of that. Yeah, it was a good session actually. It'd be nice to get him along to one of these as well.
Yeah, it seemed to. I read it at the time. Thought this looks interesting. I've just dug it out. I've still got it. Yeah.
I had a conversation with Jose Perez Rios once, and he talked to me about in the conversation he had with one of the city mayors about how to organize a city using the VSM. And I remember that he developed a recursive model of the VSM to address from the transport to the whole city. And it was amazing. I'm not sure how practical, because managing the city from the VSM maybe it's a long shot.
Well, this paper's got two loops. It seems to have the cybernetic inner loop, improving the system for the enterprise, and then the outer loop is really sort of learning about how you fit into your environment. So, which sounds, so yes, it's basically a kind of environmental circuit and the internal system circuit.
That sounds very interesting. I missed the roll espejo. So just my final reflection of the presentation is this: are we getting late? Because why this question? Because all these organizations are currently using system thinking into their policy making or their strategy or their proposal, or requiring system thinking for working in the public sector, for example, in the government. And even though system thinking principles are coming from whatever the methodology around, it is a good news that the institutions are using these frameworks, but the institutions usually are the last ones, or the last one to introduce these methodologies. So I cannot see, just checking this example, I cannot see the cybernetic there using. So we are using this cybernetic model. Maybe it's my own ignorance, or maybe I didn't research deeply, but they are calling system thinking. They are not calling them just cybernetic principles, or mentioning in a different way. So, and I think there is a huge opportunity, and that's my final reflection. I think really there is a huge opportunity to close the gap between the young practitioners that are just focusing on climate change, on food system, urban planning, transportation, or whatever the complex problem that we have to solve and we are facing right now. We have a huge opportunity to close this gap, to provide them with these principles, these guidelines, these tools, this whatever. And for me, this is an invitation for Bilia. Yeah. So, Jonathan, you raise your hand.
Yes, I was gonna say, I think that's an excellent challenge to leave us with, and a very prescient one. And I think that's something we in the society need to, and I know it's something that's been on Peter's mind, Peter Kavalak, our president. So I think that is a really prescient question to leave us all with. I've really enjoyed today. I think it's been brilliant, but I will pass to Miguel to kind of, close us off. So thank you.
Yeah, so Miguel, thank you very much. This has been a truly engaging session. One of the things that I thank you for as well is to come here to challenge us. I'm kind of like a black sheep in the organization. I'm, I've never taken the traditional academic road, and so sometimes I come up with some crazy ideas, and I think I really hit the nail on the head with the invitation to you. I've been trying to challenge the organization to reach out to a broader audience. And the interesting thing about the session tonight was that you're able to communicate with the very sophisticated audience here, but I think you've led us into some paths that might bring some ideas on how to broaden our perspectives. And thanks to everyone else as well. And we hope to have you here again. So
thank you very much, all. Thank you. It was a very enjoyable session and very interesting discussion. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Miguel, again for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Guys, bye.
Bye-bye.